On the second day of my marriage, Margaret laid down several rules for me.
First, breakfast must be prepared by 4 a.m., lunch ready by noon, and dinner by 6 p.m.
She continued without pausing.
Second, personal clothing must be hand-washed, and the bed linen should be cleaned weekly. The house must be swept, mopped, and dusted daily.
I listened in disbelief as she went on.
Third, I have a habit of soaking my feet every night. You must prepare the water and assist me.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Fourth, when elders speak, you must stand, not interrupt, and never talk back. Fifth, you must seek my permission to go out, and you can no longer associate with your old friends. Sixth, you cannot sleep until we do, and must be available at all times. I haven't thought of the rest yet, but I'll let you know when I do.
Margaret was listing these rules just as I woke up. Although Michael wasn't up to much, the entire wedding day had left me exhausted and sore, and I had fallen asleep immediately. I had no idea when Michael left in the morning. By the time I woke up, it was already past 9. I found some milk and bread for myself. Margaret then brought out a handwritten A4 sheet and began reading out the rules she had painstakingly thought up the previous day. I couldn't help but laugh, spilling milk on the table. I said, "Margaret, I'm married into a wealthy family to be a lady, not a maid."
You, an orphan, want to be a lady? You should be grateful I allowed you in. These are your duties.
I stuffed the last piece of bread into my mouth, swallowed, and looked at her calmly. I refused to do them. What can you do about it?
How dare you disobey me?
Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are? Margaret's face turned pale with anger, her hand trembling as she pointed at me, unable to speak. I'm going back to sleep. Don't call me for lunch. As I walked up the stairs, Margaret yelled behind me.
What are you so proud of? You're just a stand-in.
I knew I was a stand-in from the start. When Michael approached me, he told me I resembled his first love. She had left from a high-rise building in the city when he was 25 and passed away. Since then, Michael had been a changed man. I bore a slight resemblance to her, and upon our first meeting, he decided to marry me. I was an orphan, a graduate from an ordinary university, working as a clerk in a small company. Someone like me would never have been allowed into the Smith family. Michael's mother didn't like me, but she didn't dare to stop me. Michael's first love had ended her life after being forced apart by his mother. For years, Michael's relationship with her had been strained. Standing on the stairs, looking down at her, I smirked with endless sarcasm.
Do you think I truly love your son?
Ha!
Margaret, infuriated, raised her voice sharply.
I knew it. You're only after our money. You gold digger.
I had planned to catch up on sleep, but since she called me a gold digger, I had to do something to live up to her accusation. I went upstairs, changed clothes, put on makeup, and then grabbed the supplementary card Michael had given me before heading downstairs.
Where are you going?
Margaret was sulking on the sofa, her face as dark as a pot's bottom.
To the mall, of course. This is the supplementary card Michael gave me. No limit. He said I could spend as I please.
Margaret exploded, jumping up and rushing over to snatch the card.
You can't go. This is the Smith family's money. You won't spend a single cent.
An elderly woman like her couldn't match my agility. She didn't even touch the hem of my clothes. I strode towards the door, with Margaret chasing after me. She chased, I fled, and as we reached the door, I suddenly twisted my ankle. Margaret seized the opportunity, pushing me to the ground while cursing.
Still trying to run? You little wretch, let me show you my power.
She cursed while snatching the card from my hand. I looked up at her, tears streaming down my face.
Margaret, please. I just have a stomachache and need to go to the hospital. I'll do everything you asked. I'm not refusing. Please let me go to the hospital first. My stomach really hurts.
As I spoke, a piece of A4 paper filled with the family's rules fell to the ground from somewhere. Margaret froze. Margaret was so focused on grabbing me that she didn't notice the journalists arriving. Flashlights went off, illuminating her stunned face.
Mrs. Smith, are you mistreating your new daughter-in-law?
Mrs. Smith, do both Mr. Smiths know about this?
The Smith Company has long been involved in charity. Isn't your behavior contrary to the company's values?
Sharp questions bombarded Margaret, leaving her flustered and at a loss for words. Her face turned red, and she struggled to respond. A kind female journalist helped me up.
Mrs. Young, are you all right? Do you need me to call a car to take you to the hospital?
Thank you, I'm grateful.
Suddenly, someone noticed the A4 paper on the ground, now covered in shoe prints.
What's this?
The journalist picked up the paper and began reading aloud.
1. Wake up at 4 a.m. every day to make breakfast.
With each rule read, Margaret's face grew paler. By the time they finished, her face was as white as powdered sugar.
My God, is it this hard to be a daughter-in-law in a wealthy family?
Is this marrying a wife or hiring a maid?
Are wealthy families this stingy?
Click, click, click. The journalists took a flurry of photos of the A4 paper, their eyes gleaming with excitement. After all, the Smith family had just held a grand wedding yesterday, and several of the journalists here had covered and live-streamed the event. Not even a day had passed, and there was already a conflict between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. This was too sensational. I was taken to the hospital. Reports and tests took time, so I stayed there for a while. Wearing a hospital gown, hooked up to an 4, and with a bit more powder on my face, I looked pitiful and endearing. Some journalists followed me to the hospital, trying to get more details from me. But I stuck to my innocent persona, taking all the blame upon myself and never saying a bad word about Margaret. The journalists had no choice but to take photos of me in the hospital to report back. Later, I saw the photo online with the caption, "Orphan mistreated by wealthy mother-in-law ends up in the hospital." Is this a twist of human nature or a moral decline? It had that familiar melodramatic flavor.
Margaret slammed the table, her voice reverberating through the room. Yo! How dare you disobey me?
I looked at her, a smirk playing on my lips.
Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are?
Margaret's face turned pale with anger, her hand trembled as she pointed at me, words failing her.
You.
I yawned, stretching lazily.
I'm going back to sleep. Don't call me for lunch.
As I walked up the stairs, Margaret's voice echoed behind me.
What are you so proud of? You're just a stand-in.
I stayed in the hospital for a week, and Michael would come to visit me after work every day. He didn't speak, just sat quietly, occasionally glancing at me, as if he was looking at someone else through me. During this week, the Smith family had a tough time. Mrs. Smith's mistreatment of her daughter-in-law was trending at the top, and despite the Smith family's influence, they couldn't suppress it. Online mothers initiated a boycott of Smith products, partners applied pressure, and competitors took the opportunity to smear them. For a while, negative news about the Smith family was everywhere. John brought Margaret to the hospital to apologize.
Don't take it to heart with Margaret. She hasn't had much education and has old-fashioned ideas.
Both John and Margaret came from rural backgrounds and hadn't received much education. But John was smart and built the Smith Company from a small workshop into a listed company.
I spoke to the doctor. He said you're fine and can be discharged. There are journalists outside, let Margaret support you. We're family, and we'll continue to live together. It's not a big deal, no need to let outsiders laugh at us.
I nodded obediently, understanding John's intention. We needed to appear harmonious for the journalists to take some photos, maybe even an interview, and explain it all as a misunderstanding. But unexpectedly, just as the journalists were about to ask questions after taking photos, their phones started ringing. Yes, every single one of their phones rang. The journalists looked down, each showing a mix of surprise and excitement, as if they had stumbled upon a major scoop.
Mrs. Smith, do you know Miss Emily?
It said she was Mr. Young's first love, and because you disapproved of her poor background, you forced them to break up, leading Miss Emily to take her own life. Is that true?
Mrs. Smith, what exactly did you say to Miss Emily that drove her to such despair?
Mr. Smith, were you aware of this? Do you support Mrs. Smith's actions?
Mr. Smith, the Smith family sponsors so many underprivileged children each year. Is it all just for show?
Cameras and microphones were almost shoved into John and Margaret's faces, with questions coming one after another. I instinctively looked at Michael. He had one hand in his pocket, the other clenched at his side, his expression still indifferent, but the tight line of his lips and the clenched fist betrayed his emotions. I saw the pain in his eyes. Margaret slammed the table, her voice echoing through the room.
You! How dare you disobey me?
I looked at her, a smile playing on my lips.
Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are?
Margaret's face turned pale with anger, her hand trembling as she pointed at me.
You.
I yawned, feeling bored by the confrontation.
I'm going back to sleep. Don't call me for lunch.
As I walked up the stairs, Margaret yelled after me.
What are you so proud of? You're just a stand-in.
10 years ago, I was 18. The case of a female college student ending her life for love didn't cause much of a stir at the time. The social news section barely mentioned it, focusing instead on educating young people about having a healthy view of love and cherishing life. Margaret's words instantly excited the journalists, who were like wolves scenting prey, their eyes almost glowing with anticipation. Only David, the male journalist, had a dark look in his eyes.
Promiscuous? What does Mrs. Smith mean by that? Is there more to this story?
Margaret, emotionally charged, couldn't wait to shout out.
The Hua family and our family are worlds apart. I just gave her some money to break up with him. She was too proud to take it and refused to break up. I told her that as long as I was around, she would never marry into the Smith family. What did I do wrong? What mother would look out for her son? The Hua family is just an ordinary family. Emily's mother is a factory worker, and her father is a taxi driver. How could such a family be a match for ours?
Margaret's disdain was clear as she continued.
After I talked to Emily, she got upset and went to a bar to drink. She got drunk and tangled with a stranger. When she woke up, she couldn't handle it and ended her life. How is that my fault?
A human life seemed insignificant in Margaret's words. She rolled her eyes as she spoke, showing no attempt to hide her disdain and contempt for Emily. John didn't stop her. Perhaps he also thought Emily brought it upon herself. Revealing the truth at the right time might even help salvage the Smith family's image and reputation. Margaret grew more and more agitated.
What decent girl goes to a bar? Emily was clearly not respectable.
Enough.
With a facade of compassion, John spoke.
Respect for the deceased. The girl is already gone. Say no more.
Margaret fell silent but held her head high like a victor. Michael's cold gaze fell on his parents. He said nothing, just took my wrist and led me away. Margaret slammed the table, her voice shaking with fury.
You! How dare you disobey me?
I looked at her, a smirk playing on my lips.
Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are?
Margaret's face turned pale with anger, her hand trembling as she pointed at me, unable to speak.
You.
I yawned, feeling completely unbothered.
I'm going back to sleep. Don't call me for lunch.
As I walked up the stairs, Margaret's voice echoed behind me.
What are you so proud of? You're just a stand-in.
Margaret became paranoid and overly suspicious. She hired a private detective to follow John, but nothing came of it. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She was rarely home, and without her, the air in the house felt fresher.
Started learning how to make soup from the new housekeeper. I'm an orphan. I never experienced the warmth of a family growing up. After marrying Michael, I genuinely treated his parents as my own, but Margaret looks down on me because of my background. Aunt Lucy, your soup is delicious. Can you teach me? I want to make it for Margaret.
The housekeepers at the Smith household are well paid with good benefits. If it weren't for Margaret wanting to control me and dismissing the longtime housekeeper, Aunt Lucy wouldn't have gotten this opportunity.
Of course. I'll teach you all my best recipes.
Aunt Lucy, eager to please her new employers, agreed immediately. Of course, I wasn't a quick learner. Mostly, Aunt Lucy made the soup while I helped out.
Let's not tell Margaret yet. She's still angry. If she knows I made it, she won't drink it. Once she gets used to it, I'll tell her. Maybe by then, she'll be moved.
People have hearts. If you treat her sincerely, she'll change her view of you.
I always avoided arguing with Margaret in front of others. Whenever there was a third person present, I acted like a meek, innocent daughter-in-law. So Aunt Lucy didn't know that Margaret and I had already fallen out. She saw me as a poor young wife who was constantly scolded by Margaret but never talked back. The soup was delicious. Margaret drank several bowls without suspecting it was made by me and even praised Aunt Lucy several times. John had been irritable lately, probably because his investigation into the mastermind wasn't going well. He had a cold sore on his lip, and Margaret instructed Aunt Lucy to make a soothing soup for him. I overheard John several times in his study, angrily talking on the phone.
One string, one column. You still haven't found out who owns that small company? Am I paying you to do nothing?
In the evening, I knocked on Michael's door.
What's up?
Asked him about one string, one column.
It's a small company in the mother and baby industry. It's not as big as the Smiths, but it has a good reputation. Several of our major clients have been poached by them.
He spoke concisely, as if he was very familiar with it. I had a good idea of what was going on. Margaret made headlines again after a major misunderstanding.
Did you hear? Margaret mistook a significant client for a mistress and, along with her friends, attacked her.
The client called the police, and John had to intervene, spending a considerable sum to settle the matter. Once home, John confronted Margaret.
You hit her? For what? Do you realize what you've done?
Her face turned to the side, 5 clear finger marks visible. Everyone present, including the maid, me, and Michael, witnessed it.
You hit me? You hit me for another woman?
She owns Runchang Plaza, and she's been a loyal client despite others leaving. You drove her away. The Smith family will be ruined by you sooner or later.
John's anger was palpable.
I didn't mean to. I thought she was your lover. I saw you two enter the hotel together.
Her voice regained its sharp tone.
Yes, you two entered the hotel together. I saw it with my own eyes. Is this how you maintain clients? You shameless!
John couldn't be bothered to respond.
Was it May 17th? That day Michael told me he and Dad were going to the Four Seasons Hotel for a meeting, and other company leaders were there too.
Margaret's face turned a myriad of colors.
Humph.
He left, his disdain evident. Michael glanced at Margaret, indifferent.
Why didn't you tell me earlier? Did you want to see me make a fool of myself? I knew you had bad intentions.
Aunt Lucy looked at me sympathetically. I lowered my head, not saying a word, looking extremely aggrieved.
Don't pay attention to her.
Margaret stomped her feet downstairs, her anger clear as she scolded Aunt Lucy. After Margaret went back to her room, I went to the kitchen to heat up the soup I had prepared in the afternoon, asking Aunt Lucy to take it to Margaret.
Margaret has it tough too. We should understand her.
That night, Margaret had a nightmare. Her screams echoed through the house.
Don't come near me. It wasn't me who harmed you. Don't come near me. Don't come near me.
Margaret no longer suspected John. She believed she was haunted.
I'd been dreaming of Emily for several nights. I'm afraid to sleep at night.
She had become increasingly neurotic during the day, screaming and panicking at the slightest noise. The house was covered with talismans from the temple. Her room was filled with peachwood swords and holy water, and the floor was scattered with rice.
Maybe a Taoist priest can exorcise the spirits.
Since Margaret's outburst, John rarely came home. Michael hadn't moved out, but watched Margaret's actions with cold detachment. Neither the priest's rituals nor the ghost-repelling items Margaret bought had any effect. Margaret's condition worsened. One night, in a fit of madness, Margaret rushed out and accidentally stepped on the carpet at the top of the stairs, tumbling down. Margaret was paralyzed. She was unlucky and broke her spine, condemning her to a life in bed. John and Michael decided to send Margaret to a nursing home, hiring private caregivers and nurses.
I have a daughter-in-law, she should take care of me at home. I don't want to stay in the hospital.
Don't worry. The hospital has complete facilities and professional staff, which will be better for your recovery. The kids and I will visit you regularly.
Margaret didn't listen. She knew John was just placating her, and she looked to Michael with hopeful eyes. At that moment, Michael was comforting me because I felt sorry for Margaret, my face full of sorrow and eyes brimming with tears. As we took the elevator, we could still hear Margaret's cries echoing from the hospital room. May 9th is Emily's Memorial Day. I bought flowers and went to the cemetery to pay my respects. In this small plot of land lies the entire Hua family. I encountered Michael there, holding a bouquet of Emily's favorite sunflowers.
Sirius, when did you find out about my identity?
Sirius, I knew from the beginning.
Did you marry me to make it easier for me to seek revenge?
Yes.
Did you send me that letter?
Yes.
My name is Sarah, and I am Emily's cousin. My parents died in an accident when I was young, and the Hua family took me in. The entire Hua family treated me well, and Emily and I were as close as sisters. When she passed away, I was in my senior year of high school, attending a boarding school and only coming home once a month. Uncle Tom didn't tell me, fearing it would distract me. By the time I returned home, the entire Hua family was gone.
Sad, although the Hua family had adopted me, my household registration was still with the Luo family. To outsiders, I was just a relative's child temporarily staying with the Hua family. I was just a young girl, and no one thought to inform me.
Uncle Tom's funeral was handled by the community, and I didn't even get to see them one last time. Later, I gradually learned about the cause of the Hua family's demise from the neighbors. I also found my cousin's phone in a drawer at home, which contained a message she left before her passing.
Sad, in her message, my cousin said that she and Michael had planned to get married after she graduated, but Michael's mother disapproved and privately humiliated her in various ways. Heartbroken and humiliated, my cousin went to a bar to drown her sorrows. Drunk and disoriented, she ended up with a stranger. Feeling guilty towards Michael and believing that the Pei family already looked down on her, she thought there was no way she could marry Michael after what happened. In utter despair, my cousin ended her own life.
This message was largely consistent with what Michael's mother had said, but I immediately noticed something off. The message was written in a continuous stream, which was not my cousin's writing style. Moreover, there was one thing my cousin had only told me. Knowing her, she would never have gone drinking in such a situation. My cousin did not take her own life. I planned to take the phone to the police station the next day to report it.
Serious, but that night, our house was burglarized, and valuable items, including the phone, were stolen. I went to the police station several times afterward, but no one believed me.
My cousin's body had already been cremated, and the crime scene had been cleaned multiple times. Any clues would have been long gone. My college entrance exam results were disappointing, landing me in an ordinary university. Academics didn't interest me, my focus was on finding the truth.
I knew about Michael, but Jessica never mentioned his family background. I only knew Michael was her senior.
Michael was very low-key. None of the teachers or students at school knew he was the heir of the Smith family. I found nothing. Until the third year after graduating from university, I received a letter.
The letter detailed how Jessica was harmed. She definitely didn't take her own life.
Part of the note was true. Michael's mother did come to see her, offering her money to leave Michael. She refused and accidentally revealed signs of pregnancy.
Yes, Jessica was expecting, so she couldn't have gone to a bar to drink. Even Uncle Tom, Aunt Jane, and Michael didn't know about this, she only secretly told me.
She wanted to surprise Michael with the news on a special day. Michael's mother, noticing the pregnancy, momentarily softened her attitude, giving Jessica hope.
But Michael's mother used an excuse to leave for a while, bought some harmful medication, and hid it in her bag. When Jessica wasn't paying attention, she spiked her drink.
Under her coaxing, Jessica drank the entire glass. Michael's mother then revealed her true colors.
I tell you, even if you're expecting, I won't let you in. You're not worthy.
Jessica experienced severe pain on her way home and almost passed out. She was only 2 months along, but Michael's mother used a triple dose to ensure the pregnancy was terminated. A kind person took Jessica to the hospital, but she ended up in a hotel. Jessica was brutally mistreated and passed away due to severe complications. The perpetrator, to cover up the crime, staged her death as a self-inflicted act. However, the perpetrator was merely following orders, and the one behind it was Michael's father, Robert.
Robert, like Michael's mother, looked down on Jessica, but he was smarter. He never showed any dissatisfaction with Jessica in front of Michael. He incited Michael's mother to act, while he observed from the shadows.
He knew his son well. Whether Jessica was expecting or not, Michael would marry her. He needed a legitimate reason to refuse their marriage.
When Michael's mother acted and Jessica was defenseless, he arranged for someone to harm her, but he didn't expect her to die.
As the chairman of the Smith family, Robert had power and influence. A girl with no background, her death was inconsequential. He staged Jessica's demise and erased other evidence. He even cleverly had the perpetrator report it to the police.
No one suspected anything, not even Uncle Tom and Aunt Jane. Even Michael's mother thought Jessica was pretending to be expecting while getting drunk at a bar.
The letter also included the perpetrator's information. When I found him, he had already been severely injured by debt collectors due to gambling debts. His wife and children had left him, and he was bedridden, cared for only by his 80-year-old mother.
He didn't have long to live. Only Robert and Michael's mother remained.
I deliberately approached Michael, letting him notice my resemblance to Emily. I actually had a series of plans to seduce him, but they weren't needed. He was attracted to me at our first meeting.
Looking back, he was just teaming up with me for revenge.
Margaret slammed the table, her voice echoing in the room. You! How dare you disobey me?
I looked at her, a faint smile playing on my lips.
Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are?
Margaret's face turned pale, her hand trembling as she pointed at me.
You.
I yawned and started to walk away.
I'm going back to sleep. Don't call me for lunch.
As I walked up the stairs, Margaret's voice followed me. What are you so proud of? You're just a stand-in.
The weather was hot, and I was alone in the spacious living room. Aunt Lucy had gone out to buy groceries. I glanced at the clock on the wall. At 4:52, Robert pushed the door open and came in. He sat on the sofa opposite me. I looked up at him. When I married Michael, his hair was still black and shiny, without a single gray strand. Now, suddenly, his temples were gray, and he looked 10 years older.
I just realized how much you resemble Emily.
So he had indeed traced it back to me. I sneered.
Too late.
It's not too late. The past wrongs were the Smith family's fault, but now you're married to Michael. Michael's mother has already faced retribution, and Emily has been gone for many years. Let the past be the past. The Smith Corporation was founded by me and will be left to you and Michael. The company's bankruptcy won't benefit you.
His words were vague. He must not know that I already knew the whole truth about the past. I remained silent, as if in thought.
Are you the boss behind one string, one column?
I didn't answer his question. Instead, I said,
Michael has more conscience than you. If you transfer all your shares to Michael, I'll let the Smith Corporation go.
Robert hesitated.
Didn't you just say the Smith Corporation would be ours in the future? I haven't even asked you to transfer the shares yet. What, you can't bear to give them to your own son?
Robert's face turned red. Naturally, he couldn't bear it, but he had no better option now. At least if he transferred his shares to Michael, Michael would become the absolute controlling shareholder of the Smith Corporation. As long as one column stopped targeting the Smith Corporation, the company would have a chance to recover and rise again.
Fine, I agree.
The share transfer agreement was signed that night, and Robert sent me a photo of it. I called him.
Mr. Smith, why didn't you study more when you were young? I heard you only have a middle school education.
Robert's education had always been his sore spot. Even though he later obtained a degree from a foreign university after achieving success, everyone knew it was just for show, a facade to maintain his wealthy image. He was infuriated by my jab at his pride.
What do you mean?
Have you memorized Li Shangyin's The Brocade Zither?
Sarah, what exactly are you trying to say?
I ignored him and recited the first 2 lines of the Brocade Zither.
The Brocade Zither has 50 strings, each string and column evokes memories of the past.
Robert on the other end of the phone was clearly taken aback.
Each string and column evokes memories of the past. Mr. Smith, do you know who misses Emily the most in this world? It's your son, Michael. The boss behind one string, one column is Michael.
One string, one column acquired the Smith Corporation, but it didn't become a subsidiary. Michael dissolved the Smith Corporation, liquidated its assets, and planned to donate all the money to charity. When Robert heard the news, he fainted on the spot. But that was far from the end. Shortly after he regained consciousness, the tax authorities came knocking. During the liquidation process, Michael discovered massive tax evasion by the Smith Corporation. In a display of integrity, Michael reported Robert. The final outcome was that Robert was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and the Smith Corporation ceased to exist forever. I chose a day to visit the prison. Robert glared at me with hatred, but his loathing for Michael was even more profound.
Why didn't Michael come?
I leaned in closer to him.
You caused the demise of the woman he loved most. He hates you too much to visit you.
Robert's eyes narrowed sharply, his face changing color as he stared at me in disbelief.
But don't worry, all the evidence was destroyed, and we won't call the police. However, I did prepare a gift for you. I hope you like it.
I smiled at him and turned to leave. Not long after, news came from the prison that Robert had passed away. He was given something by a fellow inmate, leading to his demise. An eye for an eye. My great revenge was complete. However, the one who loved me would never wake up again. Michael and I got divorced, and I took half of his assets. On the day we received the divorce certificate, I joked with him.
So, have you tried with other women? Still no luck?
His face remained expressionless, but he answered seriously.
Still no luck.
Don't be discouraged. Medical science is very advanced now.
He suddenly said something unexpected.
I'm sorry.
I was surprised. Sorry for what?
I could have sought revenge on my own, but they are my parents after all. I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I had to use your hand. I'm very sorry for dragging you into this hatred. You're still young. In the future, you should live well.
I smiled.
No need to apologize. In fact, I should thank you for giving me this opportunity. Without you, I would never have been able to get my revenge. Brother-in-law, you're still young too. You should live well in the future.
He nodded slightly, a faint smile appearing on his lips, and there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. I bought the Orange News where David worked and made him the president. In this world of injustice and inequality, someone has to speak up. I don't know how much I can do, but I will certainly try.